Good morning and welcome back to Reading Wikis for You. Uh, this is my first attempt at doing a weekly live or doing a live stream for this channel. Um, Obviously, anyways. Um, so for those of you who are new here, my name is Brian. I run Reading Wikis for You. And basically the point of the channel is to read different wiki articles, uh, learn some things, find some interesting things, and for right now, to be honest with you, that's about it. I've been having a lot of fun with it. I've been running every day since technically August 31st of 2025. But in reality, I I've that was just like August 31st was more of like a placeholder video. That's what you see as like the intro if you ever go to the actual channel page. But otherwise, it started September 1st, and I have uploaded a brand new video every day since then. I've since started adding in a few extra videos covering more current events. So far, I've only done about 14 of those. Um, but um, but yeah, it's been interesting. I don't do the current events videos every day. Basically, if I find a story or if there's something going on in the news that maybe there's some bits of background information that might inspire me to do it. Um, Unfortunately, I don't have necessarily a plan for how to approach those. So anyway, so those are a little bit different. So for now, the primary focus is getting at least one video up every single day to cover something. So a lot of them end up being things that I am interested in. It could be you know military vehicles, it could be places, it could be people. One thing that I have been doing that I know at least one audience viewer has noticed, as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, I find that we have, to me, a very, very interesting history over the last couple hundred years. And so I try to find some, relevant topics to that. Some of them are history related, some of them are more current. But overall, it's kind of just I what I think is interesting. So, um, anyway, so I do that. But yeah, I have covered all sorts of things. I have on Saturday and Sunday, I mix it up. Typically, the articles during Monday through Friday come from Wikipedia. Wikipedia is more what I would call um, actual knowledge information. Um, to put it simply, so it's like I'm going after like an actual place, an actual event, an actual thing. Uh, but because to me, there are a couple of interesting wikis out there for fictional universes that I enjoy, primarily Battletech and Warhammer 40,000. Basically, on weekends, I will do videos related to that. So Saturdays are typically Battletech, and I will like what I've been doing so far is the major factions. Basically, if you're familiar with BattleTech, the I started with the great houses of the inner sphere, and I've since moved in to the original clans of Nicholas Kerensky. I'm still working through those. I'm actually kind of shocked because that has actually taken me a while. um as of right now, I won't finish the clans until March. So that's actually been taking me quite a while to get through. Um, but it's been an interesting dive to see how some of the factions are covered. Some of them are much more in depth, some of them not at all. And when I say not at all, like I had one where it was like a 10-minute video, whereas a lot of them are 30 to 45 minutes. So just kind of interesting how that worked. But then Sundays I do something from Warhammer 40,000. So with that, I decided to start with the Primarchs of the different Space Marine legions. There are 18 that are known, two that have gone missing. I didn't do, obviously, with the missing ones, they have basically no information on them. So I didn't read any articles for those. But I have since done a couple of extra. There was one viewer request for the Blood Drinkers, and so I read that article a couple of months ago. And since I've finished the Primarchs, I've actually gone in to doing other things. So I've done the Sabbath Worlds Crusade. I did uh, the Adeptus Custodes. That actually went live as of the time of me doing this stream, and yeah, so it's definitely been a mix. Some people seem to enjoy some of them, some people, you know, kind of bounce off some of the videos, so it's kind of hit and miss. But essentially I'm kind of just plugging away until we get to a critical mass where people essentially want to um hang out, or start requesting different articles. So I do get some requests, not as many as I would like, but they do come in, and I have been getting those into the schedule. So I actually do have a schedule. It's just essentially it's just an Excel spreadsheet, and it's got every day of the year, and so it's allowed me to pre-plan some things. Like on Mondays, I will do one of the teams of the NFL, and so I've got it listed out as far as what teams I'm going to do, um, and you know, what's up, Bear the Gen X GM? Uh, I am funny, sir. How dare you? but but anyways, so I wanted to, a friend of mine when I was starting suggested I do the teams of the NFL, and so I basically I've been working my way through that. Those are going to last quite a bit longer. I think that takes me in. Yeah, I don't finish the NFL teams until April. So, but I am going to start in March after opening day. I am going to start doing Major League Baseball teams. Um, so anyway, so that'll start making a shift over. So, anyways, that's essentially what the channel is. um but it's been a lot of fun. There's been a lot of things that I've read, a lot of things that I was not aware of, a lot of things that I've been kind of surprised to learn, things I thought I knew, things that have kind of changed my perspective. So it's been a bit of a treat. So anyways, so Bear, since you are the only one watching, um uh what have you watched any of the videos that I have put out? Any of them at all? It doesn't have to be, you don't have to say you watched them all, or, just one or two. Maybe what is it that caught your eye? What is it that made you say, "You know what? I'm willing to listen to Brian talk for, 30 to 45 minutes." Um let's see. While I wait for a response, let's see. I'm going to switch some camera angles here. And I'm going to. So the thought process on this live stream, because I want to turn this into a weekly live stream. I will be honest. Right now, I am kind of playing um with time frames. Because as far as when I can do it, as far as when actually works for people, things like that. That's what I'm trying to figure out. Basically, I was sitting here, I had open time, so I decided that I would go live and start doing this. But one of the things that I do when I'm reading the articles is I try to not editorialize. Occasionally, I'll drop like a couple of little comments, either at the beginning or at the end. Once or twice, I've done it in the middle, but for the most part, I try to keep it where I'm just reading the article as is. I want to present the information um, mostly neutral. Yes, I realize Wikipedia does have its own bias. I can totally accept that. But in general, I find it an acceptable resource. In most cases, it does seem to at least try to get both sides of an argument put in, but at the end of the day, there's also lots and lots of footnotes. So I do think the information is generally well sourced. Usually they'll flag if it's not well sourced or it needs better information. And so again, that's why I am willing to accept it for what this project is. Um Anyways, so my thought process was essentially like, to do a weekly live stream and then talk about the articles, talk about why I selected it, what it was that that made me pick to do that article. Sometimes it'll be because a person asked for it. Sometimes it'll be because I decided that I thought it was interesting. Um, so that's what the live stream is supposed to be about. Also, while we're doing it, I'd absolutely love it if anybody watching, if you're watching live, absolutely drop something into the chat. And I am, and yes, about an article that you'd like to hear more about. If you're watching this after the fact, put it in the comments. You know, comments are always appreciated on YouTube. So looking at this week, one of the articles was for the USS Pueblo. I was kind of stuck looking for an article to do, so I actually went into Wikipedia and just typed in the date. So it went up on the 23rd. So I just typed in January 23rd. And so here's like a whole list of events. Um and as I was going through, I saw 1968, the USS Pueblo is attacked and seized by the Korean People's Navy. So I was like, okay, that actually sounds interesting. I don't know anything about that. But as you go down, it's like, okay, so here's this. There was an earthquake, or Northwestern Air Flight 738 crashes after takeoff from Fort Smith Airport. Um, you know, people who were born on this day, people who died, holidays, not a whole lot of holidays for the day. Obviously, they'll give references and links to it. But that's how I ended up on the USS Pueblo page. I found it absolutely fast. Like I said, I had no idea that this had actually, or I had no idea that this event occurred. Um, what I did think was one of the most interesting things is that part of the reason that this ship got captured, um, is literally just a whole mess load of bad planning. Um, they were they were sent out, in my opinion, kind of unprepared. They were given classified material because at the end of the day, it was a spy ship, and but they were not given the material to destroy any classified material if it came up. Um, they were given a cover of a couple of oceanographers, but um, but again, there was so much that just absolutely failed. You know, there was no one around them just in case. The Technically they were outside of Korean territorial waters when they were captured. Um, so it was absolutely just a complete disaster, that this happened. I don't blame the men on the ship. I mean, obviously, what do you mean? I mean, I'm looking at this with hindsight from 60 years ago. Having never actually been in that position, I'm just going off of, again, the material that I read. Um, but it just seemed like an absolute mess. Um, but the as far as the crew, they out except for one guy that died, all the crew were eventually returned about 11 months later. Um, and what where was it? It was this is supposed to be like one of Oh, okay, yeah, so it occurred a week before the start of the Tet Offensive in South Vietnam during the Vietnam War. So, essentially, they credit this as being part of the reason that, um that the politicians all sort of turned against the Vietnam War, and got the Americans to pull out. So, yeah, just with everything that happened, just super interesting. But at this point, it is technically a museum ship. It is still in North Korea. And basically North Koreans can go and tour the ship, and it is currently stationed at the Victorious War Museum in Pothanggang Canal in Pyongyang. And but it is also still considered active and in commission by the US Navy. So it is essentially, you could say, it is still considered a prisoner of war. So just just fantastic. There was a possibility of getting it returned. I want to say in okay, yeah, there. Offer to repatriate during an August 2005 diplomatic session in North Korea. Um, they basically, like, North Korea was trying to get to bribe um US officials to come over for a talks essentially to give North Korea some legitimacy. I want to say that that was probably um probably around the time that Kim Jong Un. Oh, now I want to find that out. Kim Jong Un. Kim Jong Un. Okay, leader of North Korea since 2011. Okay, so never mind. I thought maybe that was around the time of when Kim Jong Un came into power, but I guess not. So, anyways, just super super interesting story. Is it dramatically consequential to world events? Not really. But it's history, and some of the little bits of history just make things interesting. So I really enjoyed that. So all right, that was Friday. So let's go to Thursday, the Brazilian Expeditionary Force. So this was something that I did partly for me, partly for a friend of mine. So I mentioned earlier that I am a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and one of the things that we do is typically the young men will spend 2 years doing a mission for the church. It is proselyting. It is to go out and find people who are interested and end up converting to join the church. And my time was spent in Brazil. And so I absolutely love Brazil. To this day, I will say that I love Brazil. It was a wonderful experience. I absolutely enjoyed being there. And to this day, I still love everything about Brazil. I have not been back since I returned. It has been over 25 years. I would like to go back. I have a plan to go back. Um, it hasn't happened yet. So the plan essentially depends on something. Basically, the church is building a new temple in the area of Brazil where I served my mission. And so essentially, I want to go when that temple opens up. It it hasn't yet, so they haven't even started construction. So that's a whole separate issue. Anyways, so I love learning different things about Brazil. Well, I was speaking to a friend of mine. I like playing model war games, so does he, and he is currently planning on building a Brazilian expeditionary force army for the game Bolt Action. Basically, it's World War II miniatures. Uh, think about it essentially like your plastic green army men, about that kind of scale. And he said he was asking, I think it was Chat GPT or Grok or one of those AI engines of a faction that he could play that is not typically played by other people. And he got the suggestion to do the Brazilian Expeditionary Force, and so he's going with it. So I thought it would be fun to read over this particular article. I think I read it once before, many years ago, in relation to a different miniatures game, Flames of War. But in this particular case, I, you know, did not. Uh, it had been quite some time, and so there was a lot of missing or different in maybe not necessarily different, but um anyways, it was still good to to see a lot of or to relearn a lot of the information. um Now, um so this is the the logo for the expeditionary forces. They were called the Smoking Cobras, essentially because I think it was a German. They mention it here at the very end. Oh no. Okay, so it was a Brazilian saying. Essentially, it's more likely for a snake to smoke a pipe than for the Brazilian Expeditionary Force to go to the front and fight. and so that's why they became called the Smoking Cobras. Uh, Now, originally it was, kind of making fun of them, but they went, and everything that I've read in this article essentially says that they fought well. Essentially, they went to Italy, mostly because Northern Europe was a little too cold for most of the Brazilians, and so uh, that's where they served, and basically, you know, fought hard. There were right here by the end of the war, they took 20,573 Axis prisoners, including 2 generals and close to 900 officers. And the division lost 948 men across all 3 services. So that's the Navy, the Army, and the Air Force. And so they lost 948 men out of 25,900. So, fought very, very well. There were a couple of quotes from Germans. Like, there was one German that they captured who essentially, said, you guys are nuts. I'm absolutely, where was it? Frankly, you Brazilians are either crazy or very brave. I never saw anyone advance against machine guns and well-defended positions with such disregard for life. You are devils. A German captain to a captured FEB lieutenant. Um, so that I didn't realize, especially because Brazil was literally the only South American country to send anybody to Europe to fight, as part of the Allied forces. Originally, they had tried to stay neutral. Basically, they're just like, we will sell our stuff to anybody. And eventually, an American delegation convinced them to come over to the side of the Allies in exchange for helping them develop the Brazilian steel industry. Because basically the Brazilians would make steel, they could send it to the United States, but they would still have the steel fabrication in Brazil. And so essentially that's what brought them into the Allied side. What was also interesting, apparently the Brazilian Navy um, essentially took over. Oh, where was it? By the end of the war, the entirety of the South Atlantic convoy had been turned over to the Brazilian Navy, thereby relieving American and British vessels for urgently needed service elsewhere. So essentially, any convoy ships, so cargo, troop transports, etc., from covering the South Atlantic, would be protected by the Brazilian Navy, pretty much exclusively. So that I thought was fantastic. Um, like, literally, I'd never heard that, about how much they were involved, even in naval operations. Looking um, at some of the ships that they had involved, they had 2 battleships, a couple of cruisers, multiple destroyers, few smaller ships, but I mean, overall, I mean, just absolutely, absolutely, just tough Navy. Just not something that I expected from them. Let's see. The other thing I thought was interesting is, like, essentially they had a theory that, like, training in advance of the war was worthless. Um, they Okay, so it says, among the veterans of that campaign, there was a consensus that only combat could adequately prepare the soldier, regardless of the quality of training received earlier. So any training that they had done, because they started organizing a couple of years before they went to Italy. Essentially, they said that preparation was worthless because essentially because they just didn't care. Whether it was leadership or the actual troops, I don't know. But I still think that was a very, very interesting way to approach it. I'm suspecting they've probably changed since then. But regardless, still a very, very interesting approach. Um, but they did see combat all over Italy. Um, they had um they were all involved up until the essentially the fall of Germany, at which point the rest of the German soldiers surrendered. Um, but still crazy. What also was interesting is they did send an air force. Basically, they sent one squadron with 48 pilots. Eventually, they lost enough that they were folded in to another. Where was it? They were folded into another unit. That was loud. Um, but they still so yeah, right here. The 12th Tactical Air Command acknowledged the efficiency of the Brazilian squadron by noting that although it flew only 5% of the total missions carried out by all squadrons under its control, it accomplished a much higher percentage of the total destruction wrought. 85% of the ammunition depots, 36% of the fuel depots, 28% of the bridges, 15% of motor vehicles, 10% of horse-drawn vehicles. So, like, they were absolutely just, fantastic. Now, what I thought was most interesting was here at the end. Essentially, at the end of the war, so um, obviously the Allies go in and occupy Europe, but Brazil's Secretary of War basically ordered them right back. The U.S. was hoping to keep them, to help with the occupation, but they were brought back, and the unit was completely dissolved. And essentially, like, it was dissolved, and the troops were scattered, um, across Brazil. Uh, and like, so right here, upon their return to Brazil, former members of the FEB faced various restrictions. Non-military veterans who were discharged upon their return were prohibited from wearing their decorations or expeditionary uniforms in public. Professional military veterans were reassigned to frontier regions or areas far from major urban centers. Um, let's see. I mean, essentially, because at the time, right, okay. The Brazilian government was concerned that the FEB might gain political leverage from its contributions to the Allied victory, however modest. So essentially, like, the government was afraid of war heroes, um, and losing power. And I thought that was absolutely fascinating. Um, and as much as I love Brazil, it does kind of put some things in perspective because, so like they have, a fascinating history, but while I was there, I you wouldn't know. The only time anything military was mentioned essentially was for things far in Brazil's past, not anything, even as remotely close as World War II. Um, so just really, really interesting how that affected um affected the Brazilian veterans. So, but regardless, still fascinating to learn about. It was a lot of fun. I got to practice a little bit of Portuguese because anytime Portuguese comes up, I try to say it correctly. Sometimes it works, sometimes not so much. Um, all right. So next we looked at, okay, so going back, that was Thursday. So going back to Wednesday, we looked at the Utah War. This again goes back to the, liking to look at Mormon history and basically this. So what I thought was interesting here. So growing up in the church, essentially there's a story where 1857, uh, federal troops are coming essentially to put down what they thought was a rebellion by the Mormons in the Utah territory. And so we tell the story. They were building the temple in Salt Lake City, and they had essentially laid down the foundation stones, um, but they weren't quite sure what was going to happen with the troops, and so they buried it, and essentially made it look like where the temple was going to be essentially was just a field, for farming. And but then they're like, oh, and then the soldiers left, and so they unburied the foundation and got back to work. And um to me, like, I mean, that's the only real part of the story that I'd ever heard. Uh, and so reading through this, um, this is all of the story leading up to, um, burying the foundations of the temple. And to me, it was really interesting because there was so much more that I didn't know. I didn't know that part of it was James Buchanan replacing Brigham Young as governor of the territory and sending in his own appointee. Um, but of course, like, no message was sent to Brigham Young ahead of time, just, that uh, his replacement was coming and he was being accompanied by a bunch of troops. Um, and, considering the tensions that the church had faced leading up to it, honestly, not entirely surprising. Um, but, you know, um, it also mentions that, you know, at the same time, the Mountain Meadows Massacre, which was unfortunately a tragedy where a bunch of people traveling to California essentially were assaulted by members of the church and essentially murdered. Maybe one day I will cover that topic, but that's one that gets a little bit sensitive. I'm not worried about the article, but I don't know. It's one of those where obviously there's some controversy, but there's been really, really good research on it since. So I might just have to read that one, um, just for my own edification. But regardless, it was a tragedy. It was addressed. Uh, the leaders of it were, as far as I understand, captured and tried for murder. So, um, you know, not a good turnout, but you know, here we are. Um, let's see. So, um, what else? Um, let's see. Oh, it also brought up basically, so it details, how everything kind of escalated, then essentially how everything kind of calmed down. The new governor of the territory was allowed to come in and take his position. Um, it was it could have gone horribly, but luckily, you know, it all it all worked out in the end. But what was kind of interesting is reading through, I found out about, where was it? Thomas Kane. And so Thomas Kane is actually a video that's going to be coming up in a couple of days. It comes out on Tuesday, which is his birthday. Like I said, that's sometimes how I'll pick things. And essentially, that's a fascinating story in and of itself. Just, how he was involved in essentially getting everybody to calm down and um resolve the situation. So um it was anyways, really, really interesting read. I definitely recommend that you check it out. Um, I'll have a link to all the videos related to this week in the description. They're not there now, but if you're watching this later, I will get them added. But obviously, go check the channel. You'll see the last 7 videos and see what was in there. All right. So that was all right. So that was the Utah War, and then that gets us to Monday. And for that, that was one of our football videos. And that was the Atlanta Falcons, which was, so I will admit, I am not the most sports inclined guys, but I try. Anyways, but what I found most fascinating here is the fact that in 60 years, it's like most teams seem to have winning records overall. But the Falcons don't. They have a compiled record of 398 wins, 512 losses, and 6 ties. I'm still not entirely sure how you tie in football. You know what? Let's look here. How to tie in football. Yes, I know. You end up with the same score, but no, I don't want to learn how to tie football shoes. How to tie a game in football. How do ties work in the NFL? All right. NFL games often come down to the final moments. While blowouts do occur, close finishes are far more common, with teams battling until the final seconds. Occasionally, though, 2 evenly matched teams end regulation tied on the scoreboard. When that happens, the game enters a 10-minute overtime period, which follows a different set of rules than the regulation game. So when the scores are tied, NFL games go into overtime. Let's see, regular season. As the rule book currently stands, each team has the opportunity to gain possession of the ball and score. A coin toss decides the order of possessions. Unless a safety occurs on the first defensive possession of the period, both teams get a chance to score. After both teams have had one possession, the team with the higher score is declared the winner. If neither team scores on its opening drive, the next team to score wins immediately. Each team receives 2 timeouts in overtime, and coaches' challenges are not permitted. If the scores remain tied at the end of the overtime period, then the game is officially declared a draw in the results column. Postseason overtime rules closely resemble those used in the regular season, but with one important distinction: a winner must be decided. Instead of ending after a single overtime period, playoff games continue in an additional 10-minute periods separated by 2-minute breaks. If the game reaches a third overtime, there is no halftime intermission. At the start of each new overtime period, the captain who lost the original coin toss gets the choice of possession or field side. Standard timing rules for the second and fourth quarters apply to the second and fourth overtime periods. If the game is still tied after 4 overtimes, a new coin toss is held and play resumes until a winner is decided. Okay. So, essentially, during the season, you'll play 10 minutes of overtime. If you're still tied, then it's a tie game. If If it's in the postseason, then if it ends in a tie, then keep playing until you figure it out. All right, I can get behind that. I just I'm only used to tie games in soccer, and so yeah, wasn't sure there. All right. But yeah, so overall, just kind of interesting. I actually really enjoy going through the history of the teams. Um, I will admit, it is shocking to me how quickly a team is willing to turn over on a head coach. Like to me, all the players, if they're getting to this level, they are already, strong players. So I'm okay. Again, it's showing my ignorance, but I'm not entirely sure what the coach is doing. Um, but for the most part, it's like, oh, this guy lost 3 games, they fired him, or this guy, we hired him, it's first year with the team, he went 3-12, and they fired him, and it's just like, it's his first year getting his feet under him, give him a chance. Now I realize these are multi-billion dollar organizations, but you know, I would, you're you would think that they would have a bit better of I mean, I realize that all the like a lot of the coaches are coming up as assistant coaches. So just the fact that they just, they're just like, nope, yeet, you're gone. Always kind of blows my mind, reading through these. Um, but it's still fun to read through. What is really interesting is like the older years. So like, if it's in the 70s, yeah, this happened and they went to the Super Bowl, or they never made the playoffs until 1982, or something like that. But then as the article gets down towards like more current day, it's like here, like blah blah blah, this happened in 2015, and like breaking down almost every single game. Here's what happened in 2016, 2017, 2018. Like again, basically breaking down every single game. Um, so for the Wikipedia editors, maybe go through and cut some of this back. Personal theory, but here we are. But it's still interesting to read. Um, uh, the stadium information is usually pretty good. Um, the logos, I read through those because it is interesting to see how they change over the years. Some of the teams start off with really strange color combinations. But eventually then it gets down to, and this is what they're using now. But regardless, it's kind of funny. Um, the rivalries I think is really, really interesting just because it does break down, it's like, okay, so the divisional rivals, essentially, if they're in the AFC West, cool. These are the 3 teams with them in the AFC West. Um, then the conference. Okay, so here's, in the AFC, these are the other teams that they kind of have issues with. And then sometimes it's like, oh, well, other teams. Well, because of, in 1920, they, lost to these guys. And so anytime they show up against them 100 years later, they're, still a big rivalry game, anyways, that's always kind of interesting. Um, but then also the articles are all kind of different. Like this one has a breakdown of wins and losses versus all the different teams. This is the Falcons is the only time I've ever seen this in all of the NFL teams. So that's always kind of interesting. But or let me phrase that. It's interesting that it showed up here. I did skip over the table. A lot of times with tables, I'm going to skip a lot of that information. Some of the records, I used to read them all. early on. Lately, I've kind of gotten away from doing those, just because of the fact that, like you'll end up with so like right here, career records, passing attempts, 6,817, Matt Ryan. Passing completions, 4,460, Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan, Matt Ryan, Matt Ryan, Matt Ryan, Matt Ryan, because it's all passing stuff. So clearly Matt Ryan, um, you know, he was a quarterback. So of course he's gonna have all passing records. Anyways, then does show all the current players. I completely skip those because if you're watching this in the past or in the future, it's probably changed. That's one reason I link all of the articles in the videos. That way people can go back and actually find that. Anyways, it's still fun. Yes, I realize I'm not the biggest of sports guys, but one story I will tell, during the day job, uh, there like when the term sports ball came out about a decade ago, I would say that around football season, another employee got all kind of grumpy about it, and it's like, oh, why are you making fun of it? You don't even know how the game works. I'm like, cool, quiz me. And he just kept asking me questions like, well, what's this? Or how many downs? 4. How many yards until a first down? 10. Just like kept asking, how many points for a touchdown? 6. How many points for a field goal? 3. Uh, how many points for a kicked conversion? 1. Anyway, just like laid out a whole bunch of things. And like he realized, oh, Brian actually does know a decent amount about football. And he started getting into like some really picky things. And he's like, yeah, it's not even fun trying to quiz you on this anymore. And I wasn't perfect, but he just assumed I knew nothing about sports because sports aren't my thing. Anyway, so it made me laugh. Still does to this day. But regardless, um it's still fun to read through and learn about the teams and learn where they came from. Um, you know, Falcons again, they have a horrible record, but they did still, appear in a couple of Super Bowls, even though they've lost. But usually the teams are rated on did you make it to the playoffs or not. So that makes sense. All right. So, yesterday, uh, yesterday was one of our fiction ones. So for BattleTech, I use this website, sarna.net. It's really good for a fictional setting and a fictional web, like fictional information. It's really, really good. Not a lot of pictures. I wish there were more pictures in the articles. Sometimes they have them, usually not, but I wish there were more pictures. But it is fun to go through, especially like right now. Um, so the clans are essentially um uh well, they're a faction. They're essentially supposed to be one society, but they're split up into 20. And by the time the game starts, there's even less of them. So some have been absorbed or eliminated. And so it is kind of interesting because you'll read through, and so like some of them have fantastic histories because they're main characters. But then like this faction, Clan Burrick, it was a super quick article. Yeah, it was 10 minutes, 45 seconds is how long it took me to read it. But it's because there wasn't a whole lot of information for it. So it was I thought that was kind of funny, but it was still enjoyable to read. So we did that one yesterday. Essentially, the Burricks essentially got in bed with pirates, and so they got wiped out and absorbed by other clans. So they don't exist anymore. Um, all right, and then for today, for the 40K video, it was the Adeptus Custodes. Now, if you're familiar with Warhammer at all, essentially the Custodes are the bodyguards of the Emperor. And so essentially this breaks down who they are, where they came from, um, and why they're super cool, their organizations. I love when they show off some of this old John Blanche art. But it's anyways, this was a lot of fun. Now, some of it was a little dry, like this. Okay, so the combat history, and it just lists all of these battles just by name. And so if you watch this one, yeah, it's going to be a little bit dry. But it was, again, if you want to know more about these, drop it in a comment, let me know. Happy to go through that. Then it goes through the organization, the ranks, the subdivisions. Anyways, it was fun. The all right, for me to editorialize a little bit, they recently announced that there are now female custodies. So when essentially forever, the game has only ever had male Space Marines and male custodies. And but they're starting to have females now because we have to be more inclusive. No, there's no female custodies. I refuse to acknowledge it. If for some reason I ever decide to build a custodies army, they will all be men. I will not use any of the female models, because it's stupid. In fact, what I think is interesting, like, so I saw something online, and it says the math that proves female custodies would destroy the custodian guard. The process of creating a custodian has a success rate, quote, an order of magnitude, unquote, lower than creating an Astartes. So Astartes are the regular Space Marines. Multiple sources have mentioned that the success rate from recruitment through training to enhancement of an Astartes is about 1%. So 1 out of 100. Let's assume the custodians are 1 out of 1,000 then, a single order of magnitude, an optimistic number. In this case, on average, you would need to go through 999 female recruits to get one custodian. 1,000 women out of the breeding pool. Let's assume noble Terran-born women are expected to produce loads of children as quickly as possible to restock the gene pool. Say 10 children. Those 1,000 women would have produced 10,000 children, an order of magnitude in the opposite direction. That's a potential 10 custodians right there, along with many potential new noble women, soldiers, aristocrats, administrators, etc. Even if we take away half of them as female, that's 5 potential custodians, all sacrificed to create one diversity hire. And finally, a woman can only become pregnant with, on average, one child once per 9 months. Meanwhile, in that same time period, a man with 2 days a week free can try to impregnate 190 women, meaning that from a breeding standpoint, a woman is 190 times more valuable than a man. Female custodians reduce the total production of candidates, reduces the replenishment of noble houses, and takes genetically pure noble women out of the gene pool for further generations. Thus, female custodians are an impossibility. The custodians would not take on female candidates, as doing so would actively hurt them and severely reduce their own potential numbers, and for no other reason than 2020's politics. So, as far as I'm concerned, they don't exist in my canon, for whatever that's worth. So, anyways, it's it's me being dumb. Is it important for the story? No, but it is something where I was thinking about it, and it's like, at the end of the day, part of the reason to play these kinds of games is because there is a story involved, and the story has to make sense. Without that, it just ruins the, you know, the excitement. You're going to spend hours building and painting these little, plastic models. You know, you're if there's no attachment, if there's no interest, who cares? Like, say you're going to build a model of an airplane. Well, if you don't care about the airplane, so what? So same kind of deal. It's interesting. Anyways, that's my rant. But, what do you think? I'd love to get your comments. Are you for the female custodies, or do you not even care because you're here for the football articles? I don't know. Let me know. But with that said, all right, that is about an hour. Which is kind of what I'm hoping to keep these at. For right now, I'm going to plan on doing them on a Sunday afternoon. I'm not 100% certain on the time, probably something around this time frame. But regardless, it was fun. It was great to go through those articles, talk with them a little bit, talk about them a little bit more. Um, again, if you want to know, more, if there's an article that you'd like to hear more about, drop it in the comments. Let me know. I'm more than happy to get that into the schedule. If you want, if you want me to bounce off of one of the articles, let me know there too. But regardless, it's been a lot of fun. So thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, hit the like button. If you are new here, hit the subscribe button. And of course, thank you so much for watching, and we'll talk to you next time.